My name is Clara Bennett. I am 25 years old. And the day my life changed was supposed to be the happiest one I had known in years. I walked out the front door in my graduation dress with the cap still pinned to my hair, ready to take photos beside the silver Toyota my grandmother bought me before she passed. The driveway was empty. I stood on the front path staring. Then I looked up and saw my father Frank on the porch holding the car keys between two fingers like they were nothing important. He told me he had sold the car that morning. He said Tyler owed money to dangerous people and that the family had to protect the family. He said I could take the bus to my new job. He said my brother needed saving and that mattered more. My grandmother had chosen that car specifically for me. She had placed my name on the title before she became too ill to manage paperwork. It was the last real decision she ever made on my behalf. That evening an unknown number called my phone. A man's voice said quietly, "Why is your name on the title of the car your father sold me?" The caller's name was Daniel Mercer. He ran a small repair shop on the east side of town and had bought the car from my father that same morning for cash. He explained the situation without anger. When he tried to begin the title transfer at the motor vehicle office, the clerk pointed out that the registered owner was not Frank Bennett. It was Clara Bennett. My father had signed the bill of sale identifying himself as the owner, which was simply not true. Daniel said he did not want stolen property in his shop. He said it clearly and without drama, which made it land harder than shouting would have. I asked what he planned to do. He said that depended partly on me. He had tried calling my father first. Frank had told him to be patient and everything would sort out. Daniel said he was not comfortable being patient about something that looked wrong. He offered to meet me if I had documents proving ownership. Before we hung up, he sent a photo to my phone. It was the bill of sale my father had signed that same morning. Beside the line marked owner, in clear handwriting, my father had written his own name. I confronted my father the next morning at the kitchen table while my mother Marla made coffee and Tyler ate leftover pasta like nothing required his attention. Frank did not deny selling the car. He said titles and paperwork were technical things that did not reflect the spirit of a family decision. He said I was being selfish, caring more about a vehicle than Tyler's safety. He said Grandma would have wanted the family protected. Tyler looked up from his bowl for 3 seconds and went back to eating. My mother said Tyler had a daughter to think about. I almost pointed out that Tyler's daughter lived with her mother and he barely contributed to her support. But I stayed quiet because I was still processing what my father had just admitted without technically admitting it. He had sold something belonging to me. He had signed his name on a document saying it was his. And he was sitting calmly at the family table explaining why I was the problem. Tyler pushed his bowl aside and leaned back with the expression of someone who had never once been held accountable. He said, "Grandma would have wanted you to help me." I walked out before I said something I could not take back. In my room I opened the top drawer and took out the envelope my grandmother had pressed into my hand 6 months before she died. She had told me to keep it somewhere safe and not show it to anyone in the house. Inside was a handwritten note on her blue stationery. She wrote that the car was mine and that no one else had any right to decide what I did with it. She had put my name on the title because she wanted the decision to be legal, clear, and impossible to argue away. She said she had been watching how things worked in our family for a long time. Reading those words alone in my room while my father sat downstairs unbothered, I understood she had not been naive. She had known exactly who she was protecting me from. I put the note back and smoothed the envelope flat with both hands. Then I noticed something underneath it that I had somehow missed every previous time I had opened it. A folded receipt from a credit union, small and slightly faded. My grandmother's handwriting was on the back. She had written my name. The credit union branch was small and quiet. A teller with careful eyes listened while I explained that my grandmother had passed and I had found a receipt with the branch address and an account reference number. She typed for a moment. Her expression became measured in the way people look when they are holding information they cannot fully share. She told me an account matching that reference had been opened under my name as a beneficiary. The account had been closed 2 years ago. The closure had required identification and a signature, and a balance had been withdrawn at that time. I had not made any withdrawal. I had not known the account existed until 3 days earlier. I stood at that counter feeling the floor tilt the way it does when you realize what seemed like a small problem has been sitting on top of something much larger. I told the teller I had never touched that account. She looked at me carefully for a long moment. Then she said something she was probably not supposed to say. She said I should ask who had held power of attorney over my grandmother's affairs before she passed. I went through every piece of family paperwork I could find. At the back of the hallway filing cabinet I found a document granting my father temporary financial authority over some of my grandmother's accounts during the final stage of her illness. Frank had told the family he used it only to pay medical bills and household costs. But the date on the credit union withdrawal did not match the final stage. It came from 14 months before she died, during a period when she was unwell but still fully sharp. I remembered visiting her that spring. She had been funny and frustrated about her medication schedule and completely clear in her thinking. I began writing everything down in a plain notebook. Dates. Account numbers. The withdrawal timing compared to what I remembered about her condition. Frank's explanation compared to what the paperwork showed. I labeled the notebook with a piece of tape across the front cover. I wrote, Grandma's gifts. Then I went through the folder again slowly. Near the bottom of a stack of old receipts I found a bank withdrawal document from that same period. The signature on it was supposed to be my grandmother's. It did not look quite right. Daniel Mercer called again 2 days later. He said my father had reached out and asked him to stop answering my calls, keep the car, and wait for things to settle down. Daniel had refused. He told me to come to his shop with whatever documents I had showing the car belonged to me. When I arrived the following morning, the silver Toyota was parked inside the main bay. It had not been touched at all. No repairs started. Daniel had left it exactly as my father delivered it. He sat across from me at a small desk and handed me a folder. Inside were copies of every message my father had sent during the sale. Most were ordinary. But one, sent the evening before the transaction, said clearly, "My daughter doesn't need to know until after the transfer." I read that line twice. Daniel watched me and said nothing. Then he told me there was something else I should know. He said my father had approached him several months earlier about purchasing a different vehicle, an SUV belonging to Tyler's ex-wife. Frank had tried the same approach, private sale, cash payment, fast paperwork, no questions asked. That earlier deal had not gone through either. Tyler's ex-wife was a woman named Amanda. When I called her, I expected hostility. Instead, she sounded the way people sound after surviving something long and draining. Tired, clear, and completely unsurprised. She told me Tyler had a pattern of using family pressure to take things from women connected to him. Money, vehicles, tax refunds. Each time there was an urgent reason presented. An emergency. Someone who needed saving. She said Frank had actively helped Tyler hide income during a child support dispute 2 years earlier, moving money through a different account to reduce what Tyler officially owed. I asked about the SUV. She said Frank had approached a buyer claiming the vehicle was a shared marital asset. She found out and stopped it herself. Frank called her difficult. Tyler said she was hurting their daughter by refusing to cooperate. Before we ended the call, Amanda said something I had not expected. She told me not to assume I fully understood Tyler's debt situation just yet. She said, if your dad sold your car to pay Tyler's debt, find out first whether that debt is really what they claimed it was. I had imagined Tyler's debt as something legitimate and frightening. Emergency bills. Overdue rent. A genuine crisis that explained the urgency. The truth was much smaller. Amanda pointed me toward 2 people Tyler actually owed money to. Neither was threatening. One was a former co-worker Tyler had borrowed $200 from 18 months earlier. The other was a cousin who had given Tyler money for a car flipping scheme, buying used vehicles cheaply and reselling them at a profit. The scheme had never completed a single transaction. The cousin had never been repaid. The money raised from selling my graduation car went toward Tyler's gambling debts and toward silencing the cousin before he told other relatives what he was owed. There had been no serious threat to Tyler's safety. No dangerous people. No real emergency. Frank had built a story making his son sound like a victim who needed rescuing, because the victim was easier to sell at the family table than irresponsible and entitled. I sat with that for a long time. Then I discovered what else Frank had done. He had told every relative in the extended family that I had volunteered to sell my graduation car to help my brother through a dangerous situation. He had turned my loss into my generosity without asking me a single word. The Sunday dinner happened 3 weeks after graduation. Frank had organized it himself. He called aunts and cousins, arranged a full meal at the house, and made sure I knew I was expected to come. I came. Halfway through the main course, Frank turned to the full table and said warmly that the family was lucky to have a daughter like Clara, who had sacrificed her graduation gift to help her brother through a dangerous time. He looked proud. He said it the way people say things they have rehearsed many times. Everyone clapped in that soft, uncertain way of people who are not entirely sure what they are applauding. I looked at my father across the table and asked him calmly, at a normal volume, to explain why he had signed a bill of sale for a car titled in my name. The clapping stopped immediately. Frank's expression hardened. My mother told me not to embarrass the family. Tyler stared at his plate and muttered that I was making myself look bitter. Then my father's sister, Aunt Denise, put down her fork and touched my arm. She leaned close and whispered, "Your grandmother warned me this was going to happen." Aunt Denise and I sat in the back garden after dinner while the rest of the family retreated inside. She told me my grandmother had come to her about 2 years before she passed. Grandma had been worried about what would happen to the things she wanted Clara to have. She had watched Frank excuse Tyler for years and had seen the pattern become more serious over time. Grandma had written a letter and asked Denise to keep a copy carefully. The letter mentioned the car by name. It mentioned a savings account. And it mentioned one more thing she wanted Clara to have when she was old enough to stand on her own. Denise had kept that copy exactly as Grandma asked and had never been sure when the right moment to share it would arrive. I asked if she would give it to me now. She said yes. But she warned me that Frank would react badly the moment he learned the letter existed. Grandma had understood that possibility too, which was why she had not left it anywhere near the house. Then Denise said something that made my hands go still. She said the letter mentioned a safety deposit box at a bank across town that my grandmother had rented years before she became ill. I called a probate attorney named Nina Caldwell the morning after speaking with Denise. She had been recommended through the legal aid program connected to my workplace. I told her everything from the beginning. The car. The title. Daniel's call. The credit union receipt. The emptied account. The withdrawal slip with the signature that did not look right. The letter Denise was holding. Nina listened without interrupting, asked careful questions, and said the safety deposit box needed to be verified before anything else could move forward. Denise provided the letter, and Nina used the reference information inside to contact the bank. She confirmed the box existed in my grandmother's name and still held items. Because my grandmother was deceased, access required a formal verification process. Nina began the paperwork immediately. She told me not to confront Frank further until we knew what the box contained. She said the less he knew about what we were building, the better. I went home and said nothing to anyone. 3 days later Nina called. She said she had reviewed the bank's access records during the verification process. My father had come to the branch 1 week after my grandmother's funeral and attempted to access the box. The bank had denied him because his name was not listed. I sat in Nina's office and let that settle. Frank had come to the bank 1 week after the funeral. He had tried to open a box that was not his. The bank had turned him away because he had no legal right to be there. Nina said his failed attempt was significant. It showed he had known the box existed and believed it held something worth taking. It also meant he had known or strongly suspected that my grandmother had prepared things he would not want found. The fact that he had never mentioned the box to any family member, not to Denise, not to my mother, not to me, was its own kind of answer. In the weeks that followed, Frank began calling relatives and calling me ungrateful. He told people I was obsessing over a car and tearing the family apart over something trivial. He said I had always been the difficult one. I heard about it through Denise, who called to remind me to stay patient. I was trying. Then Tyler sent me a message one evening. It said, "Drop this before Dad tells everyone what Grandma really thought of you." Tyler had always known which places to press. The suggestion that my grandmother had secretly disliked me landed the way only a lie told by someone close can land, not because you fully believe it, but because you are tired and the doubt finds the crack you are already guarding. That night I sat on my apartment floor and went through everything saved on my phone. Old messages from my grandmother. Birthday notes. A voice message from 2 years earlier I had kept because hearing her voice made me feel less alone. I listened to the birthday message once. Then I kept scrolling and found a voice message from a different date, saved and forgotten. In it my grandmother was telling me about a recent conversation with my father. She said, in a clear and unhurried voice, that Frank had asked her to change the car title and put his name on it instead of mine. She paused. Then she said she had refused. I played that part 3 times. She had been asked directly. She had said no directly. The car being in my name was a deliberate decision made with full knowledge that someone would eventually try to undo it. I sent the voice message to Nina that same evening. She called back within the hour. She said it was a strong piece of evidence. It directly contradicted any claim that my grandmother had intended Frank to control the car. It showed she had been asked and had refused. It confirmed my name on that title was a deliberate choice made under pressure to change it. Nina filed a police report for the unauthorized sale of titled property and began a civil claim to recover the car or its full value plus related damages. She sent Daniel a formal letter confirming my legal ownership and asking him to preserve the vehicle. He replied the same day. He said the car was exactly where it had been and that he would cooperate fully. 3 days later, Frank received official notice of the civil claim by mail. He called me that evening. His voice was sharp and loud and did not sound like a father's. He said I was going to regret involving lawyers in a family matter. He said I was choosing a piece of metal over my own blood. I did not respond. I saved the voicemail and forwarded it immediately to Nina. Frank appeared at my office on a Tuesday morning at 10:15. I had started working at a small accounting firm just 2 weeks after graduation. I was still learning the office, still earning the trust of people who had no particular reason to give it yet. My father walked through the front door and asked the receptionist for me by name. He did not sit down. He stood in the reception area with his coat on and his voice raised enough that colleagues near the entrance looked up from their desks. When I came out, he demanded I drop the complaint. He said I was embarrassing the family over something trivial. He said Tyler's situation had been real and I was too selfish to understand what real pressure looked like. I did not raise my voice. I asked him to leave. He said he was not leaving until I listened. My manager had come out of her office and was standing in the hallway behind me. She had heard enough. She walked to the front desk and asked the receptionist to call building security. Frank looked at her, then at me, and left before security arrived. My manager waited until he was gone. Then she asked quietly, "Has your father ever used your name on financial documents before?" I ran my credit report that evening from my kitchen table. I had not checked it since before graduation. There had seemed to be no reason to. There was a personal loan I had never applied for. The account had been opened 2 years ago in my name, with the mailing address listed as my parents' house. It had been paid irregularly over 18 months. The balance was still outstanding. The dates matched almost exactly with the period when my grandmother's savings account had been emptied. I felt cold in a way that had nothing to do with the room temperature. I called Nina first thing the next morning. She said this had moved past a dispute about a car. Unauthorized use of someone's identity to open a credit account was a different and more serious category of problem entirely. She told me to freeze my credit through all 3 agencies immediately and file the appropriate identity protection reports. She also said to request a copy of the loan application through the dispute process and examine every field carefully. I requested the copy. When it arrived, I went through every field. Under the emergency contact phone number, the application listed a number I recognized immediately. It was Tyler's. Tyler showed up at my apartment at 9 in the evening. The timing told me he already knew the credit report discovery was coming. He was not relaxed. He knocked twice and stood in the hallway with his hands in his jacket pockets, looking like someone who had rehearsed a speech on the drive over and forgotten most of it. I did not open the door past the chain. I told him I had a doorbell camera with audio recording whatever he said. That was completely true. He said Frank had handled everything and he had only taken what the family expected me to share. He said the loan was always meant to be temporary. He said Frank had promised it would be repaid before I ever noticed, because I never checked my credit and it had seemed safe to count on that continuing. He said he was sorry. It landed with the full weight of nothing. Then he said Frank had told him I would never look too closely, that I was the trusting kind who did not verify things. I let him finish. I said goodnight. After he left, I stood in my hallway thinking about what he had said as he turned away. He had said, "You don't even know what Dad did with Grandma's house money." I went to Nina's office the next morning with Tyler's exact words written in my notebook. She requested county property records connected to my grandmother's estate. The review took 1 week. My grandmother had owned a small house on the far edge of town. After she died, Frank had managed the sale as executor of her basic affairs. He had told every family member the house sold for a modest amount and that after fees and debts, almost nothing remained to distribute. The county records showed the actual sale price was considerably higher. The difference was large enough to matter significantly. A portion of those proceeds should have passed through the estate. Part of what should have come through had been noted in my grandmother's own paperwork as intended for me, toward housing or further education. Nina said we might not recover every dollar, but we had more than enough to require a formal accounting of the estate funds Frank had managed. She was already preparing that request when she found something else in the documents. An unsigned draft of an updated will, written in my grandmother's own handwriting, dated 8 months before she died. The draft will show what my grandmother had planned. She had intended to leave me the car, confirmed by name and description. She had intended for me to have access to the savings account that had been emptied without my knowledge. She had wanted me to receive a portion of the house sale proceeds for housing or education. The final signed will on record was older and less specific. It had been drawn up years before my grandmother understood what the family situation would look like when she was gone. But the draft, placed alongside everything else Nina had assembled, created a clear and consistent picture of intent that could not easily be dismissed. Nina arranged the documents in sequence. The draft will. The voice message. Aunt Denise's letter. The credit union receipt. The withdrawal with the mismatched signature. The title in my name. Daniel's full folder of Frank's messages. She said we had built something solid and complete. Then she said it was finally time to open the safety deposit box. The bank verification was finished. My name appeared in my grandmother's records as a designated contact. The legal paperwork had been formally approved. We were scheduled for Thursday morning. I told no one. The bank manager led us to a small private room and left us alone with the box. Nina opened it. Inside were the original car title documents showing the purchase and registration in my name, a receipt for the title paperwork, and a handwritten letter addressed directly to me. I read the letter while Nina quietly catalogued the other items. My grandmother wrote that she had spent years watching me be asked to step aside for Tyler, to make room, to be reasonable, to give up what was mine because someone else needed it more urgently. She had wanted to give me one thing that no one could pressure me out of. One thing with my name on it that could not be signed away without my direct agreement. She said she loved me and was sorry she had not been stronger sooner. I cried in that small bank room in a way I had not cried since her funeral, not from grief exactly, but from being seen by someone who could no longer see me. Nina gave me a quiet moment. Then she said there was one more item at the bottom of the box. A sealed envelope with my father's name written on the front in my grandmother's handwriting. Nina photographed the sealed envelope and added it to the case file before it was opened through proper legal channels. My grandmother had written Frank a final letter. She had done it knowing he might one day take from Clara what she had carefully set aside. She told him directly she had watched the pattern in their family for a long time. She wrote that Tyler needed to face the results of his choices before the damage spread further. She said protecting Tyler from all accountability was not love. It was harmful wearing the appearance of love, and it would keep spreading. She told Frank she forgave him. Then she said she was no longer surprised by him. I did not publish the letter. I did not use it to wound anyone publicly. I gave it to Nina as documentation of my grandmother's awareness and Frank's knowledge that she had built protection specifically because she did not fully trust him. Then Frank's attorney contacted Nina with a formal offer. If I dropped all claims and stopped involving police, Frank would try to have the car returned from Daniel. He used the word try. I read the offer once and set it down. I recognized it immediately for what it was. Fear wearing the thin costume of generosity. Frank suggested we meet in person. I chose a coffee shop near Nina's office. Nina sat beside me. Marla sat across from Frank with her hands around a cup she never lifted to drink. Frank said he hoped we could end things without the situation becoming uglier. He said he had made a difficult decision under pressure. He said any father would have done something similar for a son in real trouble. I let him finish. Then I asked one question. I asked why he had sold something he knew belonged to me. He did not answer. He looked at his coffee. He said the situation was more complicated than I was choosing to see. Then Marla put her cup down. She said she had known the car was titled in my name. Frank had told her so the evening before the sale. She said she had told herself it was temporary. That Frank would sort it out. That Tyler was in trouble again and something had to give. Her voice broke on the last sentence. She looked at me and said she had known, she had stayed quiet, and she was sorry for both. Then she said Frank had used money from my grandmother's house sale to cover Tyler's debts more than once before the car sale ever happened. She said it like she had been holding it for a very long time. He missed a repayment deadline with the cousin, stopped answering his phone, and was gone from his apartment when Frank went to check. His social media went completely silent. Amanda said he had not contacted their daughter. Frank told relatives my legal actions had placed Tyler under unbearable pressure and forced him away. Several family members sent messages saying I had destroyed my own brother. I saved every message. The guilt arrived on schedule, exactly when it was most convenient for someone else. Then Amanda called. She said Tyler had been planning to leave for at least 6 weeks before he disappeared. She had messages from him asking whether Frank would help him relocate quietly and asking for advice on starting over somewhere new. He had left because his debts were unmanageable, not because of a single thing I had done. She forwarded every relevant message to Nina immediately. Frank's version, that Clara's actions had broken the family, collapsed under a clear timestamp. The civil hearing was set for Thursday morning. On Wednesday evening, Daniel called me. He said he would be there. Thursday arrived grey and cold, which felt exactly right for the last day of something long. Daniel came to the courthouse without being formally asked. He had decided on his own to be there and speak if it helped. He testified about the sale, about the title clerk flagging Frank was not the legal owner, and about his decision to stop the transfer and call me instead. He said he made that choice because doing otherwise would have made him part of something he could not respect. Nina presented the full case in careful order. The car title. My grandmother's voice message refused Frank's request to change it. The safety deposit box letter. The emptied credit union account. The withdrawal with the wrong signature. The loan in my name with Tyler's phone number on the application. Frank's failed bank visit 1 week after the funeral. Daniel's message folder, including the one saying his daughter did not need to know until after the transfer. The actual house sale county records. Marla's honest statement. Amanda's forwarded messages proving Tyler had planned to leave weeks before the hearing. Frank was ordered to compensate Daniel in full and to pay me damages for the unauthorized sale. After the ruling, Marla stood in the hallway and said to anyone close enough to hear that Clara had not been selfish. She said Clara had been the only one telling the truth. I collected the car keys from Daniel that afternoon. I drove to the cemetery and sat by my grandmother's grave and thanked her for putting my name on that title. I thanked her for the letter and the box and for building me a way out of something she had seen coming long before I did. Then I sold the car on my own terms. The money paid for my own apartment deposit and the professional certification that moved me forward. My father called that week and asked whether I was really going to throw away the family over a car. I said it was never about the car. It was about everyone deciding my future was cheaper than Tyler's mistakes. Then I drove home with the windows down. Everything ahead of me belonged only to me.